Hang on, you want to be in the right-hand side of the frame, so I'm ready for Gordon coming in the left?
Yeah, as you are, perfect. And Gordon's going to walk in and stand next to that speaker there in a minute, but not until we give him the nods, so you can see that a bit.
That's good there.
Okay. Thanks for joining us for Loud and Clear's very first Loudcast. We couldn't have picked a better product to kick off this series of events that we're going to be running virtually rather than in the store, because we all know what's happened this year. But thank you for joining us. So we've picked the most iconic product available from our store at the moment, the Linn Sondek LP12. Now, over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to introduce you to a few friends, some that you'll know, maybe some that you don't. My man here, Gordon Lynch from Linn Products. Gordon's been with Linn for 20 years. He's done everything that one can possibly do at Linn. He's made things, he's designed things. Now he helps to train others in how to use these things to enjoy our music more.
Thank you, George. Well, I'm going to tell you the history of the LP12 and the history of Linn Products, because the two are entwined, obviously. To tell the history of the LP12 and of Linn, we need to go back to 1939, when a young man called Jack Tiefenbrunn left his native Austria and came to live in Glasgow. Jack set up a company called Castle Precision Engineering, and a few years later, a son appeared, Ivor Tiefenbrunn. Ivor followed his father's footsteps, not just as a mechanical engineer, but also in his father's love of music. So Ivor grew up in a very musical home. Jack had what would be considered a state-of-the-art music system for the time. So Ivor is working in Castle Precision Engineering, his father's company. We fast forward a little bit, and Ivor meets Evelyn, the love of his life. They get married and decide, I don't know how, the argument must have been great, to spend all of the money that they received as gifts for their wedding on a state-of-the-art hi-fi system, because as we all know, music enriches life. The system is duly purchased and the Tiefenbrunns return home to set up their new hi-fi system. But Ivor is immediately disappointed with the audio quality. It's not as engaging or as emotional as the system he grew up listening to in his father's home. So Ivor returns to the hi-fi retailer and mentions this, and they say to him, well, we think you need much larger loudspeakers, because conventional wisdom in the 1960s was that the loudspeakers are the most important part of the hi-fi chain. So Ivor digs into his pocket and returns home with his much larger, much more expensive loudspeakers. He sets the system up once more and is still disappointed. The flaws that he could identify with the original speakers, he can still identify with the larger, more expensive ones. So he returns to the retailer one more time. You need a much bigger amplifier, they tell him. So again, he digs deep into his pocket and returns home with a new, more powerful amplifier. Sets the system up once more and is again disappointed. It's still not as involving or as engaging or as emotional as the system he grew up listening to in his father's home. When he gets in touch with the hi-fi store one more time, they tell him, well, you now have the ultimate system that we can provide. There is no upgrade path. Ivor returns home thinking that perhaps it's something he's done wrong in the setup of his system that's causing the effects. So he starts experimenting. Eventually, thinking outside the box, he isolates the turntable from the rest of the system in the listening room, and suddenly the magic is back in the room. The emotion, the engagement, the involvement that he's looking for is all back. Ivor makes two very important discoveries at this point. The first is that the problem he's been experiencing all along is acoustic feedback. The output from the loudspeakers is affecting the delicate pickup of the stylus in the groove of the record and causing distortion. The second and perhaps more important discovery that he makes is that, contrary to belief in the 1960s, the loudspeakers are not the most important part of the hi-fi chain. The source product is, the thing that makes the music. It doesn't matter if you've got the best amplifiers and loudspeakers in the world, if that delicate signal isn't there to begin with, you can't magic it out of thin air. So being the tenacious character that Ivor is, he believes that he can do better, and he sets out to design and build his own turntable. Many prototypes and trials and tribulations later, eventually, in 1973, the Linn Sondek LP12 turntable goes on sale. The year previously, Ivor starts Linn Products, the company he builds to manufacture and sell the LP12. Linn is named after Linn Park, one of Ivor's favourite places to be as a young man growing up in Glasgow. Once he has the LP12, Ivor sets out on a promotional campaign. He puts the LP12 in the boot of his Ford Capri, a man after my own heart, and sets on a UK tour demonstrating his source-first philosophy. He would stroll into a hi-fi store and demand to speak to the manager or store owner, and he would make a very bold claim that his LP12 could not only make their best system sound better, but it would make their entry-level, their least expensive system sound better. And of course, it did. The LP12 was designed specifically to combat acoustic feedback. I brought along a beautiful vintage 1974 LP12 that we have here in completely original condition, featuring the Aframosia plinth and the SME tone arm that the LP12 is most famous for. So the LP12 is an entirely modular, expandable and upgradable product. Ivor Tiefenbrunn knew when he designed the LP12 in the late 1960s that technology would change and advance in the years ahead. And he wanted customers to be able to take the benefit of those upgrades that hadn't yet been designed. So here we can see just some of the upgrades and changes to key components within the LP12 over the years, and bang up to date with the current brand new carousel bearing. We live in a disposable age when things are discarded once they are deemed to be of no value. The LP12 is the antithesis of that. It's a sustainable product. It can last more than a lifetime. In fact, I know one customer in America who is the third generation of the same family to own their LP12. His grandfather bought it new in the 1970s. His father inherited it when his grandfather passed away, and he inherited it when his father passed away. When I saw that LP12 that had the traditional 1970s marked and chipped plinth, and the customer could tell me every mark and every ding and every dent on the plinth, and the retailer was upgrading the LP12 with as much flagship level climax componentry as he could fit inside it. And when I met the customer, he said he was doing this because he knew his son would inherit the LP12 in the future. So it is a product that will last beyond a lifetime, and upgrades can be purchased to improve performance at a much better price point than replacing the entire turntable. So as I mentioned earlier, the LP12 went on sale in 1973. This particular version that we have here is from 1974. Now, the real genius of the LP12 design is not just in its audio performance, which we all know is regarded as by many as the benchmark in the world of turntables. But also, the LP12 is designed as a modular, expandable and upgradable product.
What do you think would be the obvious upgrade path for them, and how easy would it be to upgrade individual bits?
Well, all the parts can be improved. Certainly, the most important improvement would be to improve the bearing. Would be to look especially at the carousel, and if the carousel is then done, we'd look at an improved sub-chassis, be it a magic sub-chassis or a core, or someone can really go for the keel sub-chassis, and then we would look at improved electronics with either a new Lingo 4 or a new Radical, or if someone's on a budget because of the success of the new Lingo and Radical, we're getting a good supply of older Lingo ones traded in, which we can service and sell on to people who are a wee bit more on a budget.
So we've got obvious choices depending on their budget, and obviously timescale, because people might want to do it slowly or they might want to do it quickly. Well, the most important thing is to remove the platter before you move the deck. It's important the platter's put safely under the deck for transportation, and it's fairly easily done. You just simply carefully lift it off the deck, put it in the preformed section here, and you'll notice that we've got 4 holes in the polystyrene. It's important, if you've got a trampoline 2 or similar, that you put the supplied piece of cardboard in, and what that will do is protect the feet so they don't go into these 4 holes. It will also keep the platter safely under the deck, and that will stop it getting chipped or marked in transit. Okay, so when you've actually got your platter in the box, the next thing to do, just show you on this one, we have to protect the main bearing surface from chatter in the car. So ideally what you want to do is use a little bit of polystyrene, put it underneath the inner platter carefully, and that will give the inner platter no chance of damage in transit, and it will also keep the bearing hole sealed so there'll be no dust or dirt can get in it in the transportation. Okay, so we've got the inner platter and the bearing secure. Ideally what you need is a tone arm. It's got a clip, put the clip on, and you might even want to put a little bit of sellotape or a tie wrap round, just in case in transportation you get any vibrations, and obviously if you've got a stylus guard, fit that. And the other thing you might want to do in most tone arms is remove the rear weight. This will make the arm a bit lighter for transportation, and it will also put less force on the bearings during that time.
Johnny, are there bits that customers should retain at home? I mean, do we need their lid when they bring the deck in, for example?
That's a good point. Again, yeah, maybe the lid's probably the unessential item here. So if you wanted to leave your lid behind, it's easily removable from the deck. Just simply lift it up and store it carefully.
Magic.
Okay, well, the number one tip for me is to keep your stylus clean. Dirty styluses will not only wear quicker, but they'll also damage your record. So every time it's the stylus clean is my best tip. And how you go about that, there's several ways. There's the Linn green paper, which is very good. There's also the small stylus carbon brushes, which are excellent. And we've also got in the shop the vibrating carbon stylus units, which are fully automatic. And this will give you a very clean stylus and a very easy way of doing it without putting the stylus at risk.
Now, as Ian mentioned, there are multiple upgrade opportunities for any LP12 customer. We make 3 motors, 3 power supplies, 3 sub-chassis, 3 tone arms, 3 cartridges. But fundamentally, one of the biggest upgrades that you can make is to the single point bearing at the heart of the LP12. Here we have a progression of 3 of the designs of single point bearing from the original 1970s single point bearing here, through to the circus bearing from the 1990s, and the brand new carousel single point bearing. Now, not a lot of people know this, but the single point bearing actually represents the Linn logo. So what many people think to be the stylus on the surface of a record is actually the tip of the platter spindle on the bottom of the single point bearing, right at the heart of the LP12. If we think about Ivor's source first philosophy that he championed right back in 1973, the single point bearing is essentially the source component within the LP12 itself. And carousel that we have here represents 12 months of hard work that we put into the bearing before we launched it in March of this year. So there are 3 main benefits to the carousel single point bearing, 2 of which will be apparent to customers immediately, and 1 will be apparent to retailers later on in life in terms of servicing. So carousel is machined from 303 grade stainless steel. It's a much more robust and much more rigid design than the older circus bearing that it supersedes. The older circus bearing has a 3-point mounting towards the sub-chassis. Carousel takes that into the 21st century. So you can see the substantial lock nut on the top of Carousel. This sandwiches the subchassis between the bearing housing and the lock nut itself to give the most rigid, strongest bond between the bearing housing and the subchassis that we've ever been able to achieve. So that increased rigidity and strength means that the music that you hear is more pitch accurate and more detailed. But when you couple that with the second benefit, which is a reduction in internal friction, there's less ambient background noise generated by the bearing in operation. So you're hearing more of the music that you love, and you're hearing it in finer quality, more pitch accurate detail. And this is apart to anyone who's had a Carousel upgrade right from the start. The third main benefit to Carousel is servicing. The base of Carousel is removable, so that the Carousel bearing can be serviced with the bearing housing still in place inside the LP12. The oil can be drained and the thrust pad can be inspected with the rest of the bearing remaining inside the LP12. But hopefully owners won't have to have that done for some years yet. So Carousel was 12 months in development at Linn, and we launched it in March this year. But we're not standing still. We're already working on the next generation of upgrades and improvements. So there's lots of life left in the LP12 yet, and lots of improvements that hopefully we can make over the coming years ahead.
So, thanks for joining our inaugural Loudcast with the Linn Sondek LP12. Don't go away, apart from to top up your wine glass, because in a few minutes we're going to be taking your questions and answers live on Facebook. So, Pam, just get all the faces in.
Top notch.
Do another one with Ian smiling this time. Just keep it rolling.
Keep it rolling. And what's that?
Suck it in, Ian. Phil Mitchell of Hi-Fi.
Here we both stand, the moon and the stars like the dance floor. All that we need is here in the still of the night. All of the words could never describe the wonder, the feeling of peace when everything is just right. Here we both stand, longing to hold one another, never to wait, wrapped in a sweet summer air, wishing that we could stay in this moment forever, into the night, young, pure and free. Take my stars on a beach that's only yours. Take my hand and we'll go dancing in the shadow of the moon. Take my hand. When we were young, the summer would seem so long, and we'd sing our favorite songs. We heard them on the radio, it was long ago. An endless night and laughter until the dawn, a time when our dreams were born, paved the way for all we have and all we need. Take my stars once when you looked at me, you were all I could see. A slow dance as you placed your hand in mine. It was never a better time. Moving to this ancient haunting melody. Take my hand and we'll go dancing underneath the stars.